Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring something that might surprise some people. It's the connection between autism and hoarding.
Mhm.
You might be thinking, wait, those two things go together, and you'd
Yeah.
be amazed how often they do. We're doing a deep dive into the article from Cheap ABA, and we're going to uncover why these two conditions sometimes happen together and what you should know.
Yeah, you're right to be curious about that. It's not about saying, that everyone on the autism spectrum experiences hoarding.
Right.
That's definitely not the case. But there is a relationship worth understanding, especially for those who are living with both or supporting someone who is.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. First things first. What exactly are we even talking about when we say hoarding? We've all got that one messy drawer that, we avoid.
Right.
But this goes way beyond clutter, right?
Exactly. Hoarding is about a persistent difficulty discarding possessions to the point that it impacts daily living and well-being. Think rooms that you can't use, blocked pathways, even safety hazards. That's when it crosses over into hoarding. And what's so fascinating is how the challenges of autism can sometimes play a role.
Yeah. The article mentioned sensory overload, and that really stood out to me. Like I can barely handle a scratchy tag on a shirt.
Right.
So imagine being bombarded by like textures and sounds and even smells like constantly,
Yeah.
all the time, things that most of us can just tune out.
Right.
It's
Really.
overwhelming just thinking about it.
It's a really important point. For someone with autism, sensory input can be incredibly intense.
I,
And certain objects might actually offer comfort or a sense of control in the middle of all that chaos.
Hmm.
It's like how some people find weighted blankets calming,
Yeah.
but on a much, much larger scale for someone with those sensory processing differences.
So it's not about the objects themselves, but
Mm.
what they represent for someone who experiences the world so differently. And then the article mentions something else that adds to this, and that's executive function,
Uh-huh.
which is kind of like our brain's organizational system.
Exactly. Executive functions are those mental processes that help us plan, organize, make decisions.
Right.
And for somebody with autism, these can be really, really tricky.
Wow.
Imagine trying to decide what to keep, what to toss, what to organize.
Yeah.
It can be so overwhelming.
Yeah.
This difficulty with executive function is something that can lead to more and more things being kept,
Right.
simply because making those decisions is just so challenging.
It's like their brain is saying, like, keep it all just in case.
Yeah.
And as if that wasn't already a lot to deal with, the article brings up two more factors that can show up, and those are anxiety and OCD.
And this is where things can get even more complex. It's important to remember that anxiety and OCD are a lot more common than a lot of people realize. But they might show up differently in those who are also on the autism spectrum.
So how do those play into hoarding then?
Well, imagine the fear of making the wrong decision about an object, about a belonging.
Mm.
For someone with anxiety and OCD, this fear can be paralyzing. It fuels this urge to keep everything just in case, even if it's broken, useless, or they've got multiples of the same thing.
It really makes you realize this isn't about, someone being messy.
Yeah.
It's about understanding these incredible challenges that are like happening in the brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's about having empathy, not judgment.
Mhm.
Right.
Definitely.
Which brings us to what I really wanted to dig into, and that's what can be done. The article talks about like some helpful approaches. And the first one is starting small.
Right.
So can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, we can't underestimate how overwhelming it feels for the individual. So instead of thinking like clean sweep, imagine starting with just one drawer.
Okay.
And that's actually how professionals who work with people who hoard, that's how they approach it. Gradual decluttering. And that makes the process less scary and can really help build confidence along the way.
So it's about those small victories, like kind of building up over time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And speaking of building, the article also mentions therapy as being like a key part of this. But it's not just talking about your feelings on a couch, right?
Not at all.
What does that actually look like?
Think of therapy in this context as equipping someone with a toolbox of strategies that they can use.
Mm.
CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, is often used to help people identify those anxious thought patterns that kind of fuel the hoarding.
So it's like rewiring the brain's response to, but what if I need this 20 years from now?
You got it.
Yeah.
It helps people challenge and change those unhelpful thought patterns about possessions. And it can even go beyond that because CBT can give people coping mechanisms for the anxiety and the stress that can come up when you're actually in the process of decluttering.
So they're not just like left to handle all of those emotions on their own. They're given tools to like manage them.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. Now, the article also mentions medication as a possibility. Is that always part of the picture?
Medication isn't a one-size-fits-all solution,
Right.
but in some cases, it can play a really important supporting role.
Okay.
If someone's dealing with very severe anxiety or OCD, medication can help get those conditions to a more manageable level, which then makes other approaches like therapy or actually decluttering more effective.
Right. So it's kind of like it's giving someone the best possible chance at success.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about, right? Like creating an environment where someone can thrive. And you know what else really stood out to me in the article? Was the power of community and like support groups.
Oh, support groups are huge,
Yeah.
whether they're online or in person. There's something so powerful about connecting with people who truly get it,
Right.
who understand these specific challenges. It creates this safe space where people can share their experiences, they can offer advice, they can encourage one another.
Right.
It's like a breath of fresh air
Yeah.
to know that you're not alone in this.
Yeah. It's like having a team in your corner,
Yeah.
cheering you on. So we've gone from, wait, autism and hoarding are connected,
Right.
to understand the why behind it,
Mhm.
to now having some really concrete, compassionate ways to support someone who might be going through this.
And it really underscores the importance of meeting people where they are.
Well-
What might seem like a simple solution for one person could be a huge mountain to climb for another.
Yeah.
So really understanding those individual needs and experiences is absolutely key to providing the right support.
It makes you think, like if you were designing a living space for someone with sensory sensitivities, what would that even look like? I bet it wouldn't be anything like those like perfectly staged homes you see in magazines.
Right, yeah. You're hitting on something really important there. This whole conversation challenges us to kind of step outside of our own assumptions
Right.
and to really consider the world from a different perspective.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective from it's just stuff
Right.
to understanding the very real why behind hoarding, especially when it's connected to autism.
Yeah.
And in doing that, we can move from a place of judgment to a place of empathy.
Absolutely. And just as importantly, I think it reminds us that there is hope and there is help.
Right.
This isn't a dead end.
Right.
It's about finding that right path forward with the right support.
Yeah, and so much of that comes down to understanding,
Yes.
to really listening to what
Yeah.
those individual needs are, and knowing that even those small steps
Right.
can make a world of difference.
Perfectly said. It's about progress, not perfection. And remembering that compassion and understanding, those can be the most powerful tools we have.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So until next time, keep those minds open and those hearts compassionate.